Um, so I'll talk to you a little more about the sixth patriarch. I realized my slides are a little messed up, so I have some other slides here. But before I talk to you about this, and we're going to get into our little exercise in a minute, I want to reiterate a little bit about what Chan and Zen Buddhism is, because I've been just kind of throwing it out there as if you guys kind of to some degree already understand it. And my guess is that most of you have some inkling about what Zen Buddhists, Chan Buddhists do. But I want to talk a little bit about this. It's a Mahayana tradition, meaning that Chan Zen Buddhists take the Bodhisattva's vow that they are not going to become enlightened until all other beings are enlightened. Okay? Now, we talked a little bit about the Mahayana tradition, and the Mahayana tradition includes chanting sutras, chanting mantras, meditating, a number of things. The Chan school is a little bit of a specialty sect of Mahayana Buddhism, in that it really emphasizes meditation. And that it really emphasizes meditation, that you're going to do and sit and meditate. And what you're going to do in your sitting meditation is really sort of, to some degree, a combination of concentration, meditation, and mindfulness. Okay? Really what you're going to be doing. And I'm going to go over the meditation technique in a little bit and talk to you about what it is. But basically, there's a certain way, it's a very simplistic way of meditating. It is a system that has stripped out anything that's sort of extraneous. Okay, so in one way, it's kind of a minimalistic system of Buddhism, okay? With the main aspect being meditating. Okay? It's a system that believes in sudden enlightenment, okay, and sudden glimpses of enlightenment. And it also, there's a belief, underlying belief in Mahayana Buddhism, which is shared by most schools of Tibetan Buddhism, by the way, that what's going on is that you are already enlightened. In other words, you have the pure perception of a Buddha. The problem is it's just clouded over. You've got a lot of crap that's obscuring this. And again, this goes back to my lecture about dependent causation, the idea that we have a misperception of reality. We go around pretending everything is permanent all the time, but all we need to do is to sort of undo that misperception, and we'll realize that we can have pure perception, that we're enlightened. And so the Zen Chan Buddhists believe that we're already enlightened. You just haven't realized it yet because you have all these misperceptions. And so so what meditation is a form of putting yourself more in the simplest, most direct state, your most simple, direct relationship with reality. And by simplifying and having that direct relationship, it's your best chance for realizing that you already are an enlightened being. Okay? So they do a lot of meditation. And everything, strip down all the extraneous stuff. Okay? That's the main thing about Zen. I wanted you to know about that. So, we get to the sixth patriarch, Wei Ning, and I'm probably pronouncing that terribly, so if any of you speak Chinese, please take my apologies for my mispronunciation of all Chinese in the class. But we'll call him Wei Ning. Now, Wei Ning was a poor, illiterate peasant boy from a town near Guangdong, China. And one day, he had a job delivering firewood to a shop. One day, he delivers firewood to the shop, and he overhears a man reciting the following line from the Diamond Sutra. And here's the line. Depending upon no thing, you must find your own mind. And immediately on hearing this, Wei Ning has the experience of sudden enlightenment. He suddenly realizes he's already enlightened. That light bulb goes on over his head, and he has a deep understanding of this. He becomes enlightened. Now, the man reciting the sutra thought maybe Wei Ning should meet the fifth patriarch, whose name was Hung Jin, at the Tung Chan Monastery in the district of Chi Chao. So he goes up there, and Wei Ning talks to the fifth patriarch. He says, "I'm a commoner come to pay my respects. I ask for nothing but Buddhahood." And the fifth patriarch replies, "You are a native of Guangdong, a barbarian. How can you expect to be a Buddha?" And Huining says, although there are northern men and there are southern men, north and south make no difference to their Buddha nature. A barbarian is different from you physically, but there is no difference in our Buddha nature. And on hearing this, the fifth patriarch realizes that this boy is enlightened. He's got it. But he decides not to tell the other monks because they might get jealous. And he goes, all right, Huining, yeah, that's cool. I guess I'll give you a job. You can go work in the kitchen and split firewood for cooking rice. He gives him a job. You can hang out in the monastery, you cook rice, make the firewood, the lowest job, right? Now, after about a year, the fifth patriarch decides to pick a successor. He's going to retire. And what he does is he starts a contest. Because, we think about nowadays, like, you guys probably in your college, anybody here take a class in poetry from the English literature department? Yeah, I didn't think so. Right? Not that big. Anybody here an English major? Literature majors in here? Yeah. Not too many on this campus, right? So we tend to think poetry, not that really important. Not an important thing anymore, right? General. But if I were to say, how many people here have listened to some rap music recently? How many people here listen to rap music? Yeah, right? So poetry now is hiding out in rap music, right? And some of the rappers are, in my opinion, what do I know? I think they're excellent poets, okay? So we still have a tradition of poetry in our society, like they did in ancient China, a tradition of poetry. And what do we have now that reminds, so these guys are going to have a contest, and they're going to use poetry in the contest. They're going to use poetry to decide who is going to be the next abbot of the monastery, the sixth patriarch, the next in the lineage of the Zen teachers. They're going to use poetry to decide this. So they are essentially going to have what you guys know of as a slam or a rap battle. That's what they're going to do. They're going to have a rap battle without the beats. I'm assuming without the beats, right? But they're essentially going to have a rap battle. Okay. Now it's way back in the day, so they don't have digital music and all that kind of stuff. So I'm assuming this is a little more slow motion, but the idea is the same, right? So it's like Eminem and 8 Mile, right? Having a rap battle, right? Well, this is back in ancient China. Same kind of idea here. So they're going to have a rap battle. And so, okay, here's a board, here's a wall. So, we'll start, again, slow motion, without the music, but go write your poem on the wall and demonstrate your experience, your spiritual realization, your understanding of Buddha nature. Just go and, put it in a poem and put it out there, okay? So guys go up on the wall and they write their thing up there. Sounds good. Some guy comes in and he slams this, puts a better one on. Oh, that's cool, right? And finally, there's a monk whose name is Shin Sui. I don't know how to pronounce this. He was the most learned. He was like the Biff of the school. You always see in the teenage movies, right? There's always Biff, right? It's always the guy who's the big jock, football player guy who dominates everybody. Well, Shin Hui was the Biff of the day. And he writes this poem on the wall. It goes like this. The body is a wisdom tree, the mind is a bright mirror to stand. Take care to wipe it all the time and allow no dust to cling. And by the way, this is a picture of a mirror. In ancient China would have been a piece of metal that was very brightly polished. Okay? And this is his poem. The body is the wisdom tree, the mind is a bright mirror in a stand. Take care to wipe it all the time, allow no dust to cling. And people are like, whoa. Shin Sui, man, he's got the enlightened mojo here, That's a pretty good poem, like, And so it just gets left up there, right? But then Huining comes along, and he can't read or write, by the way, he's illiterate. We know he's enlightened, he's illiterate. And he asks somebody, read me the poem, and they read him this poem. He's like, And he decides to come up with his slam. And he dictates it to his friend, and his friend writes it down. Okay? But before we do that, you get to Huining's poem. Your job in this class, your exercise, your reaction paper, is I would like for you guys to slam this poem. Now you know a little bit about Buddhism, you know a little bit about Zen. I want you guys to slam this poem. Now, I'm going to give you some basic guidelines. The first guideline is don't use your rational thinking brain, right? Zen Buddhism is about the felt experience of enlightenment, felt experience of your true nature, right? Not some rational argument that you made up. Okay? The other thing is, when you turn off your thinking brain, just experience for a second. Just take a moment, just think about this poem and do the first thing that comes into your mind. Don't censor yourself. That's a form of thinking. Okay, don't censor yourself. Okay? And then what you're going to do at the end of this, you're going to write it down on a piece of paper or your computer or whatever, and then you're going to upload your poem onto the website. Okay? And that's going to be your reaction paper. And no, I do not want an explanation. I don't want anything. I just want your poem. Okay? Now, if you want to be slick about it, because why not, right? You want to be extra, get karmic brownie points. You can do it in the form of a haiku, right? You can do it in a traditional short form. And what is it? It's like 7, 5, 7, something like that. 7 syllables, 5 syllables, 7 syllables. If you want to try it a haiku, simple haiku, you can try it. Yes?
So we're not going to be off points this time if we don't reach the 600.
No. In fact, this one, the shorter the better. But not two words is not enough. But you got to at least do 7 syllables. We'll make a minimum 7 syllables, right? But if you do 7, 5, 7, that's kind of a haiku form. That's very nice, right? And you can go online. You can find all these funny haikus. You know, like the spam haiku. I highly recommend it. There's a website for spam haiku about spam, not email spam, but the food spam.
Oh, goodness.
I should pull those up for you guys. They're hilarious. So I want you to do this now. So take a minute, take a deep breath, relax, let your thinking mind just go away for a second. Just put your thinking mind aside. Read the poem and write the first thing that comes to mind. And don't think. I can hear you thinking from here. Don't think about it. Just react. Body is the wisdom tree. The mind is a bright mirror in the stand. Take care to wipe it all the time. Allow no dust to cling. Okay, you should all be done by now. If you're still writing, you're thinking too much. Okay? Were I a real Zen master, I would come around with a stick. And I would see thinking, just whack you over the head with it. Shock you out of your thinking mind, right? There's another thing about Zen Buddhism. It's all about experience. Okay? It's not about being rational in your thinking mind. Your thinking mind is the mind that deludes you. It's your immediate felt experience that is the important thing. And I'm going to talk later on and tell you that this is actually something that Zen Buddhism gets from Taoism. They borrow a lot of stuff from Taoism. In fact, Zen Buddhism and Taoism, incorporate a lot of Taoism into Zen Buddhism. And this is one of the things, okay, that your experience, your immediate experience is what's really important. Not thinking, getting your thinking mind, because we get lost in our thinking minds, okay, especially college students. All right? All right, you got your poems? Mm-hmm. All right, who wants to share? Go.
Okay.
Say it loud so everybody can hear you.
The pure perception of you and me is what brings unity. Clarity is the breath of fresh air, knowing that all things are aware.
Hit you with a stick. Too much thinking. Yes.
When the waves of life beat yourself into sand, the job is done.
That's pretty good.
Oh,
You had big words like perception.
hey, I got it from here. It was from my notes.
There's the problem. Right, no, good job. Good job. Okay, go ahead.
Broken mirror, shattered mind, reflections countless, all points shine brightly as one.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. I like it. Who else? Don't be shy. Yeah.
Shine your light in the darkness, don't gather things, gather thoughts. Shine brighter and share what you've learned, that is love.
Good, but I was still hitting you with a stick. No, it's very, very good. So you don't know how to do it. So as a famous Zen master would say, only know, don't know. Stick with that don't know. I don't know what to do. Just stick with what does that don't know feel like? What is that? How does that manifest? That is a real feeling. The don't know is the real part of it, right? Not the thinking, right? The don't know is, the Zen guys would stick with the don't know. The don't know is great, right?
Open mind.
Only know, don't know.
Don't
right?
know challenges my perfectionism.
Of course it does. That's why Zen Buddhist meditation is good for you, right? Yes,
That's why I tried
yes,
that.
exactly right. There's a very famous Korean Zen master, Sensenim. Was a guy who lived in Boston. He came from Korea and went to Boston, and he wrote a book called Only Know, Don't Know. He wrote another one called Dropping Ashes on the Buddha. Brilliant guy, and he would communicate to his students via poetry. He would write them. He would give them a Zen koan, a story, and they would write him a poem, and then he would slam them back with a poem. Brilliant guy. He was a wonderful guy, and this kind of stuff. Anybody else? Yes, nice and loud.
I cut down your wisdom tree so no dust can cling.
Say it again.
I cut down your wisdom tree so no dust can cling.
Ah, okay. Very nice. Very nice. I like it. Pretty good. Pretty good. Other ones? Don't be shy. There's no right answer. Yes?
I stand before me, in my mind I await, body and spirit as one.
Pretty good, but I think I'm going to hit you with a stick. Pretty good. Pretty good. Pretty good. Yes?
I write, erase, rewrite, erase again, and then the poppy blooms.
That's really good. I think that's my favorite one so far. Pretty good. Pretty good. Might hit you with this stick with this a little bit. Yes. Anybody else? Okay, you want to see Hui Ning's poem?
Yeah. It's like one more.
Here it is.
Oh.
Fundamentally, no wisdom tree exists, nor the stand of a mirror bright. Since all is empty from the beginning, where can the dust alight? Yes.
I mean, he used the word fundamentally.
Translation. Some English person put that in there, translated it to Chinese.
Did it rhyme in Chinese too?
I don't think it doesn't have to rhyme. No, rhyming is a Western form. It doesn't have to rhyme. They made some Western guy translated and made it rhyme. So it probably originally didn't rhyme. Okay? But fundamentally, no wisdom tree exists, nor the stand of a mirror bright. Since all is empty from the beginning, where can the dust alight? So my guess is I should probably try to explain the difference in these poems to you. I will try to do. I probably won't do a good job. Here we go. What he's talking about in this one, the body is the wisdom tree, the mind is the bright mirror of the stand. There's all these, dare we say, intellectual apparatus here. There's a mirror that gets dust in it, but really these things are talking about, sort of the spiritual practice that you need to do, right? They're not talking about Buddha nature. They're not expressing Buddha nature. Because Buddha nature, you might have practice, you may have forms of meditation you do, you may wipe the mirror clean over and over and over again. That's the practice. But that's not what you're getting out of the practice. Okay? So what really, Biff is doing is describing the practice very well. He's not describing, the Buddha nature that you're really trying to get to under the practice. And once you get to the Buddha nature under the practice, what you realize that there's no trees and mirrors and stuff, there's no dust, there's just Buddha nature. Okay? It's just Buddha nature, empty of misperceptions. And this is what Hui Ning is expressing in his poem. Okay? That makes sense a little bit? Okay. So, Hui Ning writes this down. Fifth patriarch walks by, sees Biff's poems up there, he sees Hui Ning's poem, the slam on Biff's poem, and he goes, ugh, oy vey, Hui Ning is really an enlightened guy, but I better not let anybody know because these monks are going to get jealous. Because remember, even though they're Buddhist monks, they are human beings and have all human foibles that all humans have, right? Mm-hmm. They have the same thing. That doesn't make them, because they're Buddhist monks, does not make them somehow have superpowers where they can avoid being all the human things that we all do. Jealousy and all the other kind of things, sexual misconduct, all those kind of things, right? Human beings have these things. These monks are human beings. They're not enlightened, so they have these things too. So the fifth patriarch says to himself, I can't tell anybody about this. I can't tell them about Hui Ning because, you know, everybody get pissed off and they'll probably kill the poor guy. So what he does is he waits till night falls and he summons Hui Ning to his room and he says, all right, here's the deal. There's good news and there's bad news. The bad news is you've got to get the hell out of here and run for your life and go somewhere else. The good news is I'm appointing you as the sixth patriarch, and here's the symbols of my office, my robe and my bowl. So here, take these and get the hell out of here before the other ones find out, because they're going to be pissed off and try to kill you. So that's the good and the bad news. So Hui Ning takes these things and he leaves, does what he's told, and he goes down to the south of China and he founds a monastery, the Nanhua Monastery, in 675 AD near the town of Shaoguan in Guangdong province in southern China. And then continues to teach, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right, so that's the great story of Hui Ning. I thought you guys might like that. All right, so let's talk now. We've talked about China, talked to you a little bit about Chan. I mentioned to you that Chan Buddhism incorporates a lot of the native Taoism of China. And I'll talk to you a little more about this, but I'm not going to go a lot into this because we're going to talk a lot more about Taoism in a couple weeks. And I'll go into a lot of detail about Taoism. But I wanted to mention to you a couple things about Taoism that come to mind that influence Chan and Zen Buddhism. I mentioned to you this idea of sudden enlightenment, of being in the moment, okay, of the simplicity. You don't need a lot of extraneous things. And part of that simplicity is that you look out at the balance of nature. And you look out in the natural world and you see things are naturally balanced. And then what you do is in your human life, you try to echo that balance of the natural world in your human life. And that means living simply, not a lot of extraneous things, not a lot of thinking, overthinking everything. Just you try to emulate that balance. And you find that in Zen Buddhism, in Chan Buddhism. Okay? Not a lot of extraneous, not a lot of extra stuff. Everything is stripped down. And I'll tell you the saying for that in a minute. Stripped down, and you just basically you're meditating. Okay? Idea of sudden enlightenment, where you realize you're already part of the, you know, if you were Taoist, you'd say, I'm already part of the Tao. I just haven't realized it. My mind, my thinking mind has made a separation between me and the nature of everything. The Buddhists take that idea and they replace Tao with the Buddhist nature of enlightenment. And you can make an argument that's roughly the same thing. You know, if you're more philosophical about it, we can find all sorts of philosophical differences. Roughly the same idea. Okay, that you're already enlightened. You just have to realize it. That comes a little bit out of Taoism. Okay, so these things that Taoism really influences Chan Buddhism, and you have to realize that Buddhism comes to China. It is like a really alien religion. So you guys imagine that somebody comes here to California and they give you a religion, and the religion is something like, well, these aliens came to the United States. They came down to Earth. And they have, they come down and they've got these incorporeal energy bodies, and what they do is they infest you, and then they've messed you up, and now what we're going to do is we're going to do some exercises and remove those aliens from you, and then you're going to be able to become, your thinking will become clear, right? That's the religion. I come and I give you this religion, and what are you going to think about that? You go, yeah, that's weird, right? That's weird. Okay, that's weird. That's weird. And so I got my new religion, right? Most of you are going to go, yeah, I don't really like, that's too weird. I'm a Christian. I like to go to church. I like Jesus. I'm Jewish. I like Moses. I got these religions already, that I'm used to, and my whole worldview of my society, to some degree, even if people aren't religious, is built around the themes of these religions. I live a good life, and I die, and I get my rewards. Typical in Christianity. And this thing about aliens, this is really weird to me. Okay? It's really weird. And the person doing the alien religion, let's just pretend they came from China and everything's written in Chinese. There's not very much in English. So you're going to go, right? Not interested, right? By the way, I'm describing Scientology as religion, so no offense to any Scientologists in here. It's a little weird. And I'm going to charge you $2,000 for each treatment, right? So you're probably not going to go for it, right? It's a little weird. It's a little weird. When Buddhism comes to China, it is seen this way. It's a weird religion because the native religion of China, of which is somewhat to a degree expressed in Taoism, but also the sort of native culture and belief in China is not transcendent. Okay, not transcendent, because Hinduism, and then the reformer Hinduism is Buddhism. These are religions that are transcendent. In other words, you are going to transcend your everyday reality and move into a greater, have a perception of a greater reality, right? You're going to transcend everyday reality. China and Chinese culture, it's not about that. In Taoism, the appropriate place for a human being is between heaven and earth. Your appropriate place is here, standing on the earth and doing earthly things and being a human being. This is what in Taoism is really important. We'll talk about this. This is really important in Taoism. Not to transcend off to someplace, right? And so what happens in Zen Buddhism is you get an interesting melding of Buddhist ideas of transcendence in the form of enlightenment, but also this idea from Taoism that the appropriate place for a human being is to be here on earth, be a human being, and sit. And be very simple. And the transcendence is not the transcendence sort of in the Hindu way where you go off to these realms of, these beings and these gods, but the really transcendence is just being more aware of who you really are, okay? And this is one of the things that people really love, I'll admit to really loving this, about Chan and Zen Buddhism. Because it really is, you really are just becoming more aware of who you really are. You're not really transcending. And in my opinion, this actually harkens back to the teachings of the Buddha. As where Tibetan Buddhists have a lot of techniques that are very transcendent, derived from Hinduism, the ultimate goal of those techniques is the same as Zen, is to make you more aware of who you really are, right? Without a misperception of reality and all that kind of stuff that I talked about. Zen just gets away with all that transcendent sort of baggage and just goes directly to the point of just becoming more aware of who you really are. And aware that other people are the same as you, and so all the compassion stuff is there too, right? And so this is a really brilliant thing. So it really is influenced by Taoism because that comes from the culture. The people practicing Chan Buddhism in China are Chinese. They were raised in a culture where these Taoist ideas are really part of the fabric of their society, of their reality. And what they do in this form of Buddhism is to blend those in to Buddhism and make this brilliant synchronistic religion of Buddhism and Taoism. And it's one of the main things that makes Chan and Zen Buddhism just really awesome. Does that make sense? You guys and I'll talk more about the Taoist stuff a little bit later on. We'll get more into Taoism because I love Taoism too. We're going to talk about Taoism in some detail. But Zen, Chan Buddhism pulls some of this stuff in. Okay? It never becomes a huge religion in China and, by the way, in Japan. It's only on our radar because Zen Buddhism comes to America, and it's one of the first forms of Buddhism that we find in America that Americans really sort of adapt and really start to love. And it's one of the ones that we know about. So we put it in a much larger context in reality. It's because Chan and Zen Buddhism is really, it's really a monastic system. Because it's hard to sit and meditate every day for 8 hours if you've got a job. And you got to go to work and you got a family. And so it really starts out much as a monastic tradition.
What does that mean?
It means that it's mostly practiced by monks and nuns in a monastery away from society to some degree. It's not practiced by a lot of lay people, okay? People who have jobs and families and just live a regular life. Originally. And again, now as it's come to the West, that's changed, right? Quite a bit. Okay? But originally it's not. So it's not a hugely popular, regular Mahayana Buddhism with all the sutra chanting and all the other stuff is way more popular in China. You'll find a lot more of just Mahayana Buddhist temples than you'll find Chan temples. But Chan Buddhism is important. And again, Chan Buddhism is important because the Shaolin Temple is also, to some degree, is a Chan Buddhist temple. Okay, it's a Zen Buddhist temple, Chan Buddhist temple. And so Shaolin is something that's entered into our mythology in Western world. This is where Kung Fu comes from, it's where karate comes from. So it's entered in our mythology, and they were Chan Buddhists because Bodhidharma, you got to meditate, they were Chan Buddhists. So also we know about it in that way. So it's outsized in our minds compared to how many people actually practice this in China and Japan. That's a good point for you guys to remember, okay? Doesn't make it any less cool, and obviously this nice blending of Buddhism and Taoism is really, really, I find very, very attractive, very neat. And of course we've had wonderful Zen teachers come to the United States. We've had really good people to learn this from. But let's go back now. We're going to go back. We've been in China, and now we're going to move to Japan. Okay? And so Buddhism comes to Japan. It starts coming to, again, it's like China. It starts coming over probably around 600-ish in the Common Era, you know, around the time it's in China, it also makes its way to Japan, but it doesn't really stick as much. And there's some Buddhists over there. The Japanese get turned on to this stuff, and by 1100, you know, 1200, what you do is you find Japanese now coming over to China to learn Buddhism, and then they're bringing it back to Japan. And not only do they learn about Buddhism, but they also learn about other things in Chinese culture, because you got to remember back in the day, you know, China was like the big city, and Japan was like the, you know, the hillbillies out in the sticks, you know. And so, I'm going to go out to drive the, you know, the truck out to the big city and go for a swim in the cement pond, you know, it's that kind of thing, right? You know, the Japanese would go to China, and China was the seat of culture, of high culture. And so you adopt things from China, you bring it back to Japan. And then what the Japanese do, which is really brilliant, is the Japanese make it their own. And so we can go on a long, long list of things that the Japanese bring back from China around this period of time, over a long period of time, but over a period of time. One thing is like city planning. So you're going to make a new capital, and you go to China and you see how the Chinese, you know, capital is laid out, and you go, yeah, that's a really good idea. We're going to come back. We're going to make our city capital. We're going to make it just look like the Chinese city, the emperor's palace and the emperor's city. We're going to make it the same way. Lay out the roads and everything the same way. So city planning is one thing. Swords, right? So I practice Japanese sword drawing, Iaido, and we use these swords. And that sword design originally came from China. So some people went to China, and the swords is really cool, you know, and this is really great. They brought the swords back to Japan, and then the Japanese said, yeah, these are really good. We're gonna modify it a little bit. And then they modified them quite a bit and made them into these brilliantly designed weapons that became associated with samurai, right? Later on, became associated with samurai. Okay, but that was originally something that came from China. Other thing that came from China, tea drinking. Remember Bodhidharma and the eyelids? Tea. Well, the Japanese came to China, they saw the Chinese drinking tea. Not only that, they saw elaborate tea ceremonies that were done in the palace. And what do? They take the tea plants, tea leaves, tea seeds, they take the ceremony, they bring it back to Japan, and they make it their own. Okay, they make it their own. And that's where Japanese tea ceremony comes from. Okay? It originally was a Chinese court tea ceremony. And of course, in China, there's many tea ceremonies. That was one of them. But if you go over a period of time, there's all sorts of different tea ceremonies in China, different ones. In Japan, they have basically one. They took it from China this period, and they made it their own, and they made it their own thing. Okay,
Is the tea ceremony Buddhist?
The tea ceremony, oh, this is a very good question. We're going to get to this in a minute. The tea ceremony is not officially Buddhist, but it is highly influenced by Chan Buddhism, okay? Because that was what was going on in China at the time, and then the Japanese bring it back. They're studying Zen Buddhism now. It goes to Japan, and a lot of the ideas that come in Zen Buddhism influence Japanese culture as a whole. So even though in Japan, not a lot of people actually practice Zen. Actually, in Japan, Zen practitioners are a very small minority of people. The cultural influences of Zen are huge, and you find it everywhere in Japan to the modern day. I mean, the Japanese love of the modern world. You can go to a walk in a park in the middle of Tokyo, and it is the most beautiful. It's natural, and yet it is still park-like. But it's this balance between the natural world and being able to experience the natural world. Very important for Japanese people. You live in a big city like Tokyo, you can walk in the park and experience the natural world. I mean, the Japanese came up with this idea, somebody told me about this recently, of forest bathing. Where, you live a stressful life, so you go walk in the forest, you bathe in the forest, you go in the natural world, and it rejuvenates you, right? This idea, this is a very old idea, but this comes out of the influence of Zen. And even things like flower arranging, even the idea of minimalist Japanese architecture is influenced by Zen. Okay, so the influence of Zen is way outside so that the number of people actually practice it. But in history in Japan, and again, shameless plug, take the Asian warrior cultures class. In the history of Japan, there's periods of time where the elite in Japan become very interested in practicing Zen. And so because a lot of elite people do it, it has a huge influence. It's just like if Taylor Swift Taylor Swift takes up yoga, right? Taylor Swift starts doing yoga and tells everybody yoga is really awesome. You're going to see 40 million teenage girls start to practice yoga, right? It's the same idea, right? So high-ranking samurai take up Zen Buddhism, they start incorporating it into culture, people go, oh, you know, we're gonna follow suit, right? So now it's sort of interwoven with Japanese culture. Okay? So this guy, Issei, was one of the first to introduce Zen as an independent school in Japan. So there had already been Buddhists coming in Japan, Chan Buddhists, but he is one of the first to establish an independent school in Japan, so-called Rinzai school. And he's a guy who takes journeys to China, and on his second journey, he receives the Dharma transmission. He receives an official transmission of the Chan teachings. And in 1195, he founds the first Zen temple in Japan called the Shofo Kuji. He writes several books which help spread Zen in Japan, and again, you know, a lot of high-ranking people are influenced by these. More temples are founded, and he's a very man of many talents. He's invited to court quite a bit, so he's hobnobbing with all the, you know, the top government officials and the elite people. And he brings tea seeds from China and starts tea plantations in Japan. Now, according to Issei, Zen represents the essence of Buddhism, everything else stripped away. Meditation and enlightenment are of the highest importance, and the numerous students of Issei continue his work, and they maintain close contact with the Zen in China. So they maintain this contact with the Zen practitioners in China. So it's very interesting. Then another guy comes along a little bit later on, Haikun Ikaku Zenji, 1600s, one of the most important people in the history of Zen. He's seen as a reformer of Rinzai Zen and the originator of the use of koans, which are paradoxical riddles or stories in Zen. And these are usually given to the student by the master, and these ideas of these koans are to cut off the thinking, Remember I said I was going to go around and hit you with a stick when you gave your answer? Right? Cut off the thinking, because if I hit you with a stick, you'll stop thinking, you know, making up, you know, rationalizations for things, right? I hit you with a stick, in that moment when you stop that rationalization, that split second, you know, for a Zen guy, that little moment, that's a little moment of satori. And satori is a little glimpse of enlightenment. So that moment when you stop thinking, when you stop misperceiving things, that moment is a moment of enlightenment. So I can do it in a couple ways. One is I can hit you with a stick. I can shock you. I can like, wham! You know, yeah, that little moment. Hold on to that. Ah, you lost it. You know? Okay. Well, that's fine. We'll go back, right? The other way to do it is I give you a story that short-circuits your thinking mind. Okay? So what the simple Zen koan that you may have heard of before, I go to you, you're my student, I say, what is the sound of one hand clapping? Okay. I'm hitting him with a stick. That's a thinking answer. That's a thinking answer, right? He thought, oh, well, logically it would be to move my hand and make a sound with it, right? Thinking, hit you with a stick, whack, right? What is the sound of one hand clapping? I have no idea. Great, don't know. Hang on to the don't know and go meditate for a month and come back and see me, right? And you come back again and say, what is the sound of one hand clapping? You say something like, ah! And I go, close, hit you with a stick. Go do it, right? Sends you off on your way. And you come back. And this is the teaching method of the Rinzai Zen. Okay?
So you never find out the answer?
The answer is that there is no answer. The answer is that you need to have an immediate felt experience. And so as the teacher and as somebody further along the path, I can recognize when you're having an immediate experience, and I can recognize when you're fronting some rational, logical, rational answer. No, right? And there's a bunch of these, tons of these things. Another one, does a dog have Buddha nature? So you didn't do good on the hand one. So I asked you, all right, don't know. Hold on to don't know. Hold on to that. Go meditate. Right? The answer you gave me, you said you don't know. That was brilliant.
But now I know the right answer.
There's no answer.
It's I don't know.
Don't know, but it's not the intellectual I don't know. It's the felt experience of I don't know. There's no mind-body separation in Asia, right? They didn't have Descartes to screw up everything, right? I think, therefore I am. No, you are just you. Your mind and body are all interconnected. You got to feel that answer, not just know it intellectually. And you got to go meditate now. That's what you got to go meditate, and you'll feel it, right? But starting with the don't know is good. Okay, starting with the don't know is very good. That's a good starting point. Yes?
But once you incorporate language into your answer, you require to think, and therefore, like almost silence is the only answer.
That is sometimes an appropriate answer. So this is where the Rinzai guys get criticized, especially by other Buddhists. You're just playing language games, you know. That's not real Buddhism, right? But what they would say is, no, what we're really doing is we're testing to see if you had that even a momentary experience of enlightenment. So the right answer might be to scream in my face, the right answer might be to sit silent. You know, I mean, but it depends on what the experience, not on what you're thinking. The idea is to short circuit the thinking of these things, right? And the stories can be longer, okay? So here's another story, you know, which is kind of koan-like. You know, you're up on a place and, you know, and suddenly a tiger's chasing you and you're running and you come to the edge of a cliff, you know, and the tiger's gonna come and eat you, and you look down the cliff and there's a lion down there waiting to eat you, and so you jump off the cliff, and on your way down, you grab onto a branch, and you're holding there, and the branch is coming out, it's breaking, and there's a lion down below, and a tiger up above to eat you, and you see the most beautiful strawberry growing on the side of the cliff, and you taste it and go, oh, that's just the best strawberry I've ever had. It's another story, okay, that illustrates this idea, right, in the moment, right now, right, in the moment, not fantasizing about something off somewhere, something going on, right? So these are the kind of stories. Now, I'm not an expert on these. I'm sure, you know, Zen expert could give you more of these things, but this is the idea. This is the idea. You cut off the thinking mind. So the Rinzai people like to do this with language. They love doing this with language. They like these koans. They still do a lot of meditation, a ton of meditation, but they like these kind of stories and everything, okay? Now, Zenji was very close to the people. He was a man of the people, and he expressed great humanity, and he was well liked outside of his own school of Zen, so a lot of people liked him in other schools. He was a master calligrapher and writer, and again, calligraphy is another way you express Zen. So you put the paper out, and again, because you're having a real authentic experience, you just make brush strokes, and the authenticity comes through those things. And again, if you look at some of these paintings, you can see the expression of enlightenment is not just the poem you come up with, but the way in which you write it, right? So very brilliant. Now, it was Dogen, now we're going to go back in time a little bit. So we talked about, that's the Rinzai school. There's two main schools of Zen developed in Japan. That's the Rinzai school, the Koan school. The other school is the Soto school. And it was Dogen in about 1200 or so who brings the Soto Zen to Japan, the Chan school, the Soto tradition to Japan. And he thought one should not use meditation to become a Buddha. And he likened this to polishing a brick until it becomes a mirror. Instead, he says meditation should be purposeless, without desire, an expression of pure Buddha nature. In other words, you've heard this saying from Alcoholics Anonymous, right? You fake it till you make it. Okay? Fake it till you make it. So I don't know what I'm doing when I'm meditating. I know that I am already enlightened. People have told me I'm already enlightened. I just haven't realized it. So what I'm going to do is when I meditate, I'm not doing this with a goal. As I'm meditating there, I am just being the Buddha. I am just faking it till I make it. I'm the Buddha. I'm just going to sit here and be the Buddha. And so when you meditate, when you're sitting in meditation, in those moments, you are being the Buddha. And so the idea is you just do that as much as possible, and then maybe that'll carry over to the rest of your life. You know, you just fake it till you make it, and eventually you become enlightened, and you can be Buddha all the time, right? So this is the idea that you're already enlightened. You just have to, and meditation is just basically just an exercise in practicing that.
What do they mean in Alcoholics Anonymous when they say that?
What they mean is that you come in and you're trying to be sober, and you just do the best you can. You just fake it and pretend you're sober until you can stay sober, something like that. I think something else there.
Isn't that denial?
No, it's not denial. Denial is saying I'm not an alcoholic, and so I never do it. The idea is I'm an alcoholic, but I'm going to be sober. Well, I'm not, maybe I can't do that. Maybe I fall off the wagon, but I'm just going to do the best I can until I'm able to do it. So it's really just about practice, right? Fake it till you make it. Practice. Practice, 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 right? If you study music, study violin or piano or something, practice, 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 you know? That's the idea.
It almost sounds like manifesting the idea too.
You're manifesting the idea, yes, yes, you're manifesting the idea. I know in the Buddha, I can't really quite realize that, but if I just manifest being the Buddha, when I sit in meditation, I am just trying to be the Buddha, right? And I keep trying over and over and over and over again, and eventually, maybe I get it. Maybe I become the Buddha I realize I'm the Buddha all the time. Okay? So in Dogen's view, meditation is not a means to an end, but the end in itself. Okay, so when you sit in meditation, you are the Buddha. Okay, you are the Buddha. You don't need to have a goal. You don't need to do anything. You just need to do it. Okay? This is why meditation practice is so important for the Zen Buddhists, especially for the Soto Zen, because they don't do the koans as much. Every once in a while, but not too much. Mostly it's meditating, because when you sit in meditation, you are the Buddha. Okay? Now, there's a great story. Dogen Zen can be taught by polishing a brick. One day the master asked a young monk, or one day the young monk asked the master, no, one day the master asked the young monk, "Why do you sit so much in meditation?" And the monk replied, "It's for the purpose of becoming a Buddha." The master then began rubbing a brick very hard. It was now the monk's turn to ask a question. "Why," inquired, "do you rub that brick?" "To make a mirror," replied the master. "But surely, sir," said the monk, "no amount of polishing will make a brick into a mirror." "And so also," returned the master, "no amount of sitting cross-legged will make you into a Buddha." Okay. Why? Because you already are the Buddha. You don't need to become a Buddha. You already are the Buddha. So again, this idea of getting rid of this goal orientation. Goal orientation is really, to some degree, very antithetical to Zen Buddhism. Okay? This is why, by the way, it's so hard for Westerners to practice things like Zen. Very difficult, because we are so marinated in goal orientation. Even our religion, right? You know, I'm going to live a good life. I'm going to be a good Christian. I'm going to love Jesus, and then when I die, I get the goal. I go to heaven, right? It's so inculcated and it's so marinated in it. Very hard for us to get out of that mindset and just enjoy being in the process. Very difficult for us. And again, this is also a Taoist thing, right? It's being in the process. As they said in the 60s, you know, be here now. Very difficult for us. Very, very difficult. I mean, you guys right now are thinking, I'm in class here, I'm doing this class, I'm suffering through Vulcan's like lectures because, you know, in 2 years I'm going to be out of here, I'm going to have a great job and make tons of money. And I'm just suffering, you know, to get my college degree because, you know, and I'm going to get my goal at the end, right? Probably very few of us are enjoying the process of just being in school, right? And this is what I tell you guys. You come to me for advice, you know, academic advice and stuff. I'm going to tell you, don't try to rush through. Enjoy being a college student. Enjoy the process, you know, because it's really great. You'll get a lot out of it. Instead of you just thinking for the future, oh, mañana, 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 oh, I'll have that great job, I'll be rich, I'll meet the most beautiful, you know, partner, or, you know, whatever it might be, you know, mañana, mañana, no, you know, it's right now, right? What's going on right now? Process. Don't suppress what's going on now because of a fantasy about the future. Okay? So again, this is the idea. Don't like just sit and do something, you know, now it's, you know, because you're going to become the Buddha. No, just sit and be the Buddha. Okay? Just be the Buddha. Okay? This is what Dogen's saying. But it also applies to your life. It applies to your schoolwork, whatever. You know, I talk to a lot of you guys for advising, and this is the big thing I always talk to people about. You know, people come here, they want to rush through. I just want to get these classes stamped on my forehead and get out in the world. And, you know, wait a minute. You know, this is your chance to really, really, you know, be here now and really enjoy the process of learning and being in college. Very difficult. I mean, it was difficult for me when I was in college. I mean, I can relate. But I mean, this is the lesson we get from Zen is to try to, you know, get into the process. Okay, I talked to you about already, the word Zen derives from the Chinese Chan, which in turn derives from the Sanskrit dhyana. Talk about Zen meditation. You go to a Zendo. So we have Zen people here up on above Ojai. There's the Pine Mountain Zen Center. You can go there and meditate. I think they come down and do some classes in Ventura. Sadakoi Buddhist temple, I think they have Zen meditation on Thursdays maybe. And so if you go to a Zen temple, especially if you go to a very official one, there's a process what you do. You come in and you get ready to meditate. You do this, gasho, first. Respect of faith and devotion. Two hands coming together means one mind. You bow the front. And then you sit down on your seat, which is called the zafu, this pillow. You turn it clockwise. You sit down. You gasho again. You might also bow in the other direction. You sit, and you can be in kekafuza, which is also called the full lotus position. Again, notice this comes right out of India. Okay, remember it's still Buddhism, still comes from India. Full lotus position, both feet up like this. Most of us cannot do this unless you've been doing a lot of yoga. Most of us cannot do this. I will say, again, I don't mean to be sexist. I'm almost guessing every guy in this room cannot do this.
Definitely do that.
You can do that? Okay, we got one guy who can do it. Well, he's in good shape. You know, he's young, flexible. Most of us cannot do this. Very difficult. But if you can do it, more power to you. If you do a lot of yoga, you'll be able to do this. So the only time I was ever able to do this is when I was practicing yoga 4 or 5 times a week, and I was able to do this. I couldn't do it now if I put a gun to my head. Very painful, right? But most, again, you can work up to this, yes.
Isn't that also Zazen?
Yes, this is, what I'm doing is I'm describing Zazen. All Zazen means is sitting Zen. Okay, that's all, this means sitting meditation. So I'm describing the process of Zazen, yes. Okay. So you can be in full lotus if you can do it, so you're gonna be in full lotus. The rest of us are gonna be in Hanka Huza, which is half lotus, okay? Half lotus, which is perfectly fine. You're gonna sit posture straight. Very important that you are straight because this has energetic qualities that help you keep your mind will be, what goes on in your mind will also be reflected, affected by your posture. And so you wanna be straight up and down here. You don't want your neck too far back or too far forward. You will make this mudra, the dhyana mudra. Talked about this. Left hand over right, thumbs touching. Again, this is energetically helps you to meditate. Position of your eyes. You have your choice. Your eyes can be slightly opened or slightly closed. No, joke didn't, you guys didn't get the joke, okay. I tried. Eyes slightly open, cast them down about a 45-degree angle, or you can use the angle of your nose, and you can look down there without focusing on any particular thing. You don't typically close your eyes all the way because the idea is you'll get sleepy. Some people, some schools, closing your eyes is okay. Some, they really come over and hit you with a stick. It really just depends. Tibetan Buddhists, by the way, the same thing. Some of you, some schools you can close your eyes all the way. Some, they want you to keep them halfway open. Just depends, okay? Some, you can do either. The Zen guys typically keep their eyes halfway open or halfway closed, okay? You breathe in and out. You exhale completely, take a breath. Open your mouth, exhale slowly. So in and out your mouth first. Then you just close your mouth and breathe through your nose naturally. Mouth position, tongue at the roof of your mouth. Again, there's an energetic quality of this that comes out of Hinduism, by the way. You can kind of move around, get the kinks out till you make sure you're straight. And you don't concentrate on any particular object or control your thoughts. You let your thoughts come. You can concentrate on your breath going in and out. Some people in some schools like to count their breath, and what they'll do, counting their breath, they'll count their breath up to 10, and they'll start over again. That's pretty typical, a lot of Zen schools. Okay. When thoughts arise in your mind, you don't be caught up in them and struggle. You just leave them alone and let them come and go. Sometimes you get off on some tangent and you start going off. And then when you realize that, you just bring yourself back to your breath and keep meditating. Most essential thing is to not get distracted too much, bring yourself back from distraction, and not get dull or drowsy, like getting sleepy. Okay? Now, there's a bell that's rung. This signal the beginning and the end of the Zazen session. Say you are getting there and you're meditating for a long time and you get sleepy, you're getting drowsy. You'll notice in the front of the Zendo, place of Zen, there's a guy walking along with a stick, special stick. Walking along this, turn, walk along this. You're facing away from me typically. I see that you bring your hands up like this. I go, ah, and I come to you and I take my stick on the back of your shoulders. I go tap, tap, that's to let you know that I'm there. And then I go, whack, wow. It's a bamboo, slats of bamboo. It doesn't hurt you, but it shocks you, wakes you up. And then you bow, thank you for hitting me with the stick. And the guy goes back on and keeps walking. And he keeps walking.
Oh my goodness.
Right? And the guy who does the hitting the stick is called the Jikido. Okay? And he would also bow to you after hitting with the stick. Okay? So,
You're welcome.
You're welcome. Yeah. And this keeps you awake and keeps you going. The Zen guys will meditate for a long time. Typically, if you go to a Zen center and meditate and sit for around the Zazen, most places for Western, especially beginners, you maybe go a half an hour. If you go, you know, you may find a place where they go a little longer. Only place I do Zen stuff now is when I go to Hawaii. Down the road from my Tibetan Buddhist teacher, there's a Zen center. And the Zen master there in Paia, Hawaii, in Maui, is a young guy, very nice guy. And again, most of his parishioners do not practice Zen. They just come to church for Sunday services and go away. But he says a bunch of Westerners like to come and do Zen. So I go do Zen with him. And he'll go about an hour or so, and we'll do about a half an hour of sitting. And then we'll get up and we'll do walking meditation. Very slow, deliberate walking meditation. Then we go back and we'll sit another half an hour. And that's, for me, as somebody who doesn't do this a long time, that's about it for me. That's about what I can handle, right? But, you know, if you go to a Zen center and go on retreat, you may be meditating, you know, 4, 6, 7, 8 hours a day with some breaks in between for walking, meditation, and other stuff. Okay, so when you're in the Zen place, the Zen-do, or the Zen monastery, this is what you're doing all this. Your main job is to be meditating. So the guy with the stick becomes really important because it's really easy to fall asleep doing this for a while. By the way, Zen is not really a religion, like Buddhism in some way is not really a religion. In some way, the Zen people especially do not give a crap what you believe. It has nothing to do with Zen. You're just practicing Zen, you don't care what your belief system is. And so you'll see like Zen-dos like this, where there's a cross. These are Christian Zen practitioners, because it really doesn't have anything to do with what your body is doing, right? When you get done, you bow, kind of do the reverse of what you did. You bow and gasho. Stand up, take a deep breath, unfold your legs, which are probably asleep by now, so you don't stand up abruptly. Adjust your zafu, leave your seat, and walk the entrance the way you came in. And you can see this is a typical Zen-do, even though it's got the cross. Very sparse. There's not a lot of paintings on the wall. There's nothing. There's just zafus, mats, and a place, you know, place to sit. That's it. Okay? Very stripped down. Don't care if you're Muslim or Christian. Doesn't matter. Zen saying, half a mat when awake, one mat when asleep. And this is the simplicity of Zen. As humans, we don't really need much. Half a mat, you fold the mat over to meditate, and when you're done meditating, you roll the mat all the way out and you sleep on it. And that's really all you need. You don't really need much. Okay? And this stresses the simplicity of Zen. The essence of Zen is simplicity. Pares away all the non-essentials in order to get at the realization of the nature of mind. Get rid of all distractions. Okay? And the simplicity, elegance, and grace of Zen, again, as I mentioned before, has permeated Japanese art and culture. Okay? And again, Japanese, you know, they take this sense of balance from the natural world. Okay? Like all Buddhist Zen practitioners seek to realize supreme truth that underlies the appearance of the samsaric world, but that isn't a transcendent experience. It's really just sort of in a be here now, be aware experience. And so in Japan, there's a concept, it comes from Zen, known as unsweep, which means drifting clouds, flowing water. This refers also to the impermanence of all things, much like the river in the novel Siddhartha you guys are reading, right? So again, this is the idea. Not only does the natural world provide a model of balance, of being in harmony with everything, it also teaches you a very important lesson of impermanence. Because all you gotta do is look to the natural world, you'll see that things are impermanent. You know, the cherry tree is blooming now, it's very beautiful, but really in a month, all those blooms die and it becomes, you know, bare, right? The river flows this way this year, but next year it goes over here. Everything is impermanent, everything is constantly changing. And again, you see this in the novel Siddhartha when he's by the river, right? So again, this is something else that really permeates Japanese culture, you know, the beauty of it. So I do ikebana flower arranging. I put the flowers in a jar, I do it just so, and then the petals fall off the flower very slowly, and I appreciate that as, you know, as this idea of impermanence. And here's a poem from the Zen master, Sun Song, who's known affectionately as Sensenin. The human route, coming empty-handed, going empty-handed, that is human. When you are born, where do you come from? When you die, where do you go? Life is like a floating cloud which appears. Death is like a floating cloud which disappears. The floating cloud itself originally does not exist. Life and death, coming and going, are also like that. But there's one thing which always remains clear. It is pure and clear, not depending on life and death. Then what is that one pure and clear thing? So this would be a teaching poem that Cincinnati would give. So somebody would have written to him, asked him a question, he would have written them back this poem for them to contemplate. So, we got down to nuts and bolts, 3 cores of activity of Zen training. Zazen, the main thing, sitting. Second is work. The third is other practices, and there's other practices they do. These can include bowing, chanting, reading scriptures, some cases doing martial arts, other cases running or walking, okay, cooking. Zazen we talked about, and the expression is throw your whole being into sitting and meditating. So again, just sit there, be the Buddha. Samu, or working. In Zen communities, work often refers to cleaning, sweeping, washing floors, gardening, carpentry, cooking, etc. The spirit of working in Zen context, see how it supports Zen practice. As the saying goes, and I love this saying, I repeat it to my kid all the time, he hates it. A day without working, a day without eating. In other words, there's a direct relationship, uncomplicated relationship between work and your life, right? A day without working, a day without eating, right? You need to eat, you need to work. We all need to work. And again, talk about something that's permeated Japanese culture. You go to Japan, this is the attitude people have toward their work, is they take it very seriously. So you go to Japan and you get a cab, and anybody here been to Japan and got a cab? The guy in the cab driver comes, opens your door, immaculately dressed. He's wearing white gloves. He opens the door to his car, his cab. It is immaculate inside. This guy takes his job really seriously. You know, a day without work, a day without eating, right? Work is really important. You respect work, whatever your work is. Sweeping the street, driving a cab, whatever it is, you respect it because it has a direct relationship to your survival and, of course, if you're a Zen practitioner, to you being able to practice it. Okay? And this permeates Japanese culture. Other practice, Kangen, chanting sutras, some schools more than others. Sutras are chanted in a condensed sort of mantra form. Good example is the Heart Sutra they chant would be Om Gate Gate Para Gate Para Gate Bodhi Soha. Right, that would be, they just chant that over and over again. So you'll see this in some Zen schools. Not a major part of their practice, but something you find typically in Mahayana Buddhism. Some Mahayana schools do a lot more of this. The Zen guys do, some do a little, some do almost none or none at all. Some do some, but you'll see this every once in a while as an extra thing besides meditating. Bowing practice. We have this in Tibetan Buddhism too. Tibetan Buddhists do full prostrations. Zen Buddhists typically don't do full ones, they just go down to here. And the idea is you do about 108 of these a morning, and this helps you to clear your karma, okay? Again, it's not a major practice. And then, of course, we have Koan practice, and this idea of keeping a question, which is sort of an abbreviated form of Koan practice. You know, I might say, you know, what is the meaning of your life? Go think about that, meditate, come back and talk to me, right? Right? And so it'd be, you know, more condensed down, right, than a Koan, but Koan also is there too. I might give you mantra practice. Again, you can find some Zen schools, just say mantra over and over and over again, then come back and talk to me. Maybe you have a really hard time doing Zen meditation, so I'll give you a mantra. And one thing that Buddhists have known when they've come from places like Tibet and Japan is that Americans seem to do very well with mantra practice. Very good intro to Buddhist meditation, which really helps us, because just sitting and meditating is very difficult. And so sometimes you need something to keep your mind a little occupied so you don't start getting distracted, and mantra practice can do that. So they realize that Americans really do well with mantra practice. So I think probably you're seeing more of this now. I don't know about the Zen school, but definitely Tibetans love mantra practice. Mainly you go to Tibetan Buddhist school, you're going to do mantra practice. And some of the Zen guys are also suggesting this, doing some of this stuff. Koan practice we talked about. 4 Zen vows. Say these before you practice. To start into daily practice, to recite the following 4 vows. Sentient beings are numberless. We vow to save them all. It's your Bodhisattva vow. Delusions are endless. We vow to cut through them all. Teachings are infinite. We vow to learn them all. The Buddhist way is inconceivable, we vow to attain it. Okay? So that's going to cut through a little bit of the goal orientation here. Kinhin is the interval between Zazen periods when you take a break. This is when you walk around, and the guy will have a clapper thing. He'll clap, and you get up and you walk around. I actually really like this. I like to do this practice, but this is just really you do during the break for meditation. Eating. So when you eat in a Zen monastery, the eating itself is done in a very meditative way. And the food is done in a very, usually vegetarian food, done in a very, it's even made in a vegetarian way. I've been told that the most important job in the Zen monastery is not the abbot, it's actually the cook, because the cook is responsible for nourishing everybody. And so that's a huge responsibility. And so the cook has to be the cook in the Zen monastery is a position of honor. And what do they normally eat? Rice gruel, pickles. You guys had Asian pickled vegetables, delicious. Salted plum, umeboshi plum is thought to have medicinal purposes, keep you healthy. Midday meal, you have cooked barley, miso soup, pickles. Evening meal is just leftovers from morning and midday. And usually the ingredients are totally vegetarian. There's strict rules and manners observed for eating. It's done in a very ritualistic way. So again, you know, they strip down everything. Koan practice, we really talked about this already. Koan literally means a precedent-setting public record. One Zen master said it's the place where truth dwells. And again, this is also a live exchange between Zen masters and their students. So again, you do this with your teacher. So this is your relationship with your teacher is expressed in this Koan practice. Okay? And sometimes the teacher will hit you with a stick. Not all the time. Now, two main schools of Zen, we already sort of talked about this. There's another school too called the Obaku school. We're not going to talk about that one. If you're interested in that, I've got a book on that. But the two main schools are the Rinzai and the Soto. The Rinzai, both Rinzai and Soto stress sudden enlightenment. Rinzai emphasizes satori or kinsho. These are little glimpses, these little moments of enlightenment that you get, little satori moments. And the Soto school just, they more emphasize sort of like continuous development, continuous enlightenment. Yes?
On a little bit tangent, but like, how do they run the monasteries and stuff? Like, are they all funded by the public or is it government?
Yeah, typically what happens, these monasteries may in the past been supported by like the government or by the king. So like the Shaolin monastery was established by the emperor. You know, that part of China at that time established the monastery and gave support to it. Typically the monks support themselves by begging. They might go out into town with a bowl and they would beg for, you know, just, if you go to Japan, you'll see monks just standing out there with a bowl and people come by and put money in there. It's considered to be good karma to give money to the monks. So they may support themselves that way. They may form businesses. So if you go up to San Francisco and you go to San Francisco Wharf, there's a restaurant called Green's. It is a full-on vegetarian restaurant. It is absolutely delicious food. And it is basically a restaurant. It's a business that supports, I think it's the Tassajara Zen Center. I think it's one of the Zen centers up in the Bay Area. And that they form a business and they do that and people work there. And so, you know, like work, right? Remember work? Well, their work is they go to the restaurant and they work and they go back to the Zen monastery and they meditate. And so again, you know, modern world, you know, they have to find ways to support yourself. Sometimes you might have enough patrons, enough lay people get interested, and you have, you know, lay people will support the monastery, and then, you know, they can come there and they can meditate in shorter bouts. Again, so you'll find that. So if you go to Satakoi and you go to the temple, the Buddhist center over there, you'll see that, you know, there's a community of Vietnamese people support that place. They give money to the temple, and so all these kind of things you'll see. And that's not just true for Zen temple. That's true for Buddhists and Hindus and anybody who's doing one of these kind of things, right? But sometimes they you know, like the Greens restaurant people, they you know, they just started a restaurant to support themselves. Rinzai uses pressure, crisis atmosphere generated by the koans to push people. The Soto guys don't do that. They just want to be calm and with sharp attention. Yes?
I just had a question, going back a little bit. The monasteries in China are, am I correct in saying that are active at this point?
They are, the Chan monasteries are very similar. They don't have, my understanding is they don't have a specific delineation into Rinzai or Soto. That's Japanese.
No, I'm talking about just because of suppression of religion in China.
For a while, they had a really hard time. Really hard time. What's happened now is it's lightened up a little bit for them, because Buddhism now is seen as sort of like now a traditional Chinese religion, so they've lightened up a lot on it. Also, what they've done is they've gotten rid of a lot of the monks. There's not a lot of monks in some of these places, and they bring in monks who are essentially like park rangers, because Westerners and other people will come there and pay money to go. They do this in Tibet, but they also do it in China. So I was at the monastery in Xi'an, which was a Mahayana monastery, and they may have had some Chan Buddhists there. And I talked to one of the monks there, and I go, "What are these guys doing?" He goes, "Oh, they're monks." I go, "Well, really?" He goes, "Well, really, they're kind of like park rangers, you know. But the real monks are over here." He said, "Well, the real ones we're over here. We're actually practicing, right?" And so there's you see some of that in some of the Buddhists, but there's a little more. They're allowing a little more of it now.
But the park rangers are employed by the government?
Yeah, I think they're employed by the government. Yeah, yeah. Government. I don't know if the government's subsidizing the monasteries altogether, but they're allowing them to be open and that kind of thing. And I think there's some variability about
Some
that.
control there.
Yeah, in Tibet, it's probably a little worse than in the other parts of China, but yeah, there's some of that going on. But they had a hard time for a while. You know, Mao said, religion is the opiate of the masses, and there's a lot of persecution going on. But now it's a little bit better. Rinzai, they use koans, and the Soto people basically just sit. They sparingly use koans sometimes, but more emphasize sitting. Rinzai, great doubt leads to great enlightenment. Soto, strong confidence in our original nature. We're already Buddha. We just have to realize it. So those are some differences. I mean, the differences are relatively subtle. Okay? But if you go to a place and all you do is sit and sit and sit and sit and sit and sit and sit, that's probably Soto. Okay? If you go to a place and they're doing koans, that's probably Rinzai. Now, other schools of Japanese Buddhism we should talk about. We've only got a couple minutes. Any questions, first of all, about Zen? Zen or Chan? Any other questions about those? Okay. And again, we know about these because of martial arts, right? Because, of course, Zen greatly influenced samurai, and samurai, had a lot of influence in Japanese culture. And even if you were having to deal with samurai coming into your culture, say you're in Okinawa and the samurai come into your culture and they kind of dictate everything and push you around, well, Zen helps with that, right? So people who develop karate, also there's a little inkling of some influence of this Zen, okay? There's also influence of being in Japan circa 1930 and being a nationalist, person in the army. Also a lot in karate. Again, I'll talk about that when you take the Asian warrior culture class. Okay? But there's some Zen stuff in the martial arts. Other schools of Buddhism in Japan. So Zen is not the biggest school of Buddhism in Japan. It's one of the smaller ones. Okay? Most Japanese who identify as Buddhists are not Zen Buddhists. Okay? Shingon Buddhism. This is the Tibetan Buddhist version, a Japanese version of Tibetan Buddhism. It was transmitted to Japan through Buddhist schools. Tibetan Buddhism came down through Mongolia, maybe into China, and then into Japan. The practices are very much the same as in Tibetan Buddhism. The deities have been made over to look more Japanese. So you see these guys, remember those pictures I told you, those Dharmapala guys surrounded in flames and smoke? Well, here they are in Japanese. They've kind of been made over a little bit. Okay? But the schools are very similar. Now it's very interesting. If you go to Maui on Hawaii and you're in Lahaina, which is the real touristy part, you go one block from the touristy street in Lahaina, behind it, you will find a Japanese Shingon temple. And they're doing totally authentic stuff. The guy in there barely speaks any English. He's doing all sorts of fire ceremonies and things, total traditional Tibetan Buddhist stuff. So I went and I talked to this guy, and I said to him, well, on the other side of the island, there's a Tibetan Buddhist guy. He's over there in Paia on the other side of the island. Have you guys ever talked to? Oh, no, I have no idea he was even over there. You guys are doing the same kind of Buddhism, and you've never talked to each other, because yours is totally Japanese and yours is all Tibetan, right? But it's the same stuff. So they didn't even talk to each other, right? So it's one of my things to do when I go over sometime is get the Tibetan Lama, take him on a road trip, go on the other side of the island and visit the Shingon temple. That's one of my, I really want to introduce these guys so they know each other. They really should talk to each other, right? It makes sense. Okay? But this is in Japan. You can go to Japan. They have wonderful Shingon temples. They're really beautiful. The best one that I went to, I really enjoyed going to, was in Narita. Narita is the city of the airport. It's like going down to Compton here, right? Except in Japan, the Compton-like city has a giant temple complex, and there's Buddhist temples of all sorts there on the temple complex, including a really beautiful Shingon temple. And it's just really gorgeous, and you can go there and hang out. This is a picture. I can't remember if this is one I took in Japan or in China. Or this was either Hawaii or this was in Japan. I can't remember. But it's the same, right? Tendai is a combination of Chan Zen Buddhism and Tibetan Buddhism. So it takes a little from both. The Tendai monks take from both. The esoteric methods, the Tibetan Buddhist methods, are not as in depth as you find in Shingon Buddhism. But some very interesting practices have developed out of the Tendai school, including the marathon monks of Mount Hui. And these are monks that would traditionally run something like, I don't know, like they would take a vow that for some period of time, like 100 days or whatever, they would run this course every day, and something like 50 miles long. And what they would do is they'd run along, they'd come to a little shrine, they would go down, they'd bow down, they'd say a little prayer, a little offering to the shrine, and they would go to the next one. And it would take them, they would basically be running the whole day doing this. And this was a tradition that developed, kind of weird tradition. And back in the day, if you were a monk and you were on this and you were doing this, you took the vow you were going to do this. But say, you know, you got halfway through and you just couldn't make it anymore. You go by the side of the road and you commit seppuku, ritual suicide, and because you couldn't keep your vow. And if you supposedly along the route of these Tendai monks now, you go along, you'll see little shrines that have popped up for the monks who couldn't make it, who committed seppuku because of their commitment, right? And so these guys are still there. They still do this. A lot of marathon runners will go and try to hang with these guys. And they really are hardcore. And they don't kill themselves anymore if they can't make it, luckily. But they still do the running, and people will come by the side of the road as they're running by, and they'll get blessings. And they wear these cool hats that funnel off the rain. And their shoes are basically straw sandals. And they're running like 50 miles a day for like 100 days in a row with these. They're really amazing. So these are marathon runners go, this is amazing. And then they have to go up steps, and so good way to get some mirrors to help one of these guys up with their special stick, help one of the monks up the stairs when they do this. So this is only a practice found among these Tendai monks in Japan. Okay? It's not a common Buddhist practice, but it's very interesting these guys do this. The Jodo Shu, or Pure Land Buddhist school. This is the most popular school of Buddhism in Japan. And the Jodo school is very interesting. And another school is the Nichiren school. The Jodo Shu and Nichiren contend that humans are too depraved and weak-willed to have any hopes of getting enlightened through their own efforts, and they need others to save them, other Buddhas to save them. Okay? So for the Jodo, this involves placing your faith in the Amida Buddha, or in Sanskrit it's Amitabha Buddha, and while the Nichiren followers rely solely on the Lotus Sutra. And so these two schools of Buddhism are unique among Buddhist schools in that they don't, first of all, they don't emphasize meditation, because why bother? You're not really going to be able to get enlightened anyway. And most of the services are much like church services. You go to church like on Sunday, and they model it after Western churches. You sit in the pew and you might read some sutras, you might chant some stuff together, but it's sort of modeled on the Western church sort of model. Not a lot of meditation. If you go to the Oxnard Buddhist Temple, they are a Jodo Shu school. If you go to Maui, again, just outside of Lahaina, the tourist city, there's a beautiful Jodo Shu temple right on the ocean. It's absolutely gorgeous place. But they contend, the idea here is that you're going to get reborn into the Pure Land. So the Amida Buddha is the Buddha you pray to be born in the Pure Land. You're born in the Pure Land, and then it's much easier to get enlightened. It's hard to do as a human being, but it's easy when you're born in the Pure Land, so you get enlightened from there. Okay? And they both have mantras that you practice, because again, mantra practice you can do. So for the Jodo, it's Namo Amido Bosatsu, and for the Nichiren, you may have heard this, Namo Mihyo Ringe Kyo. It used to be people come and tell you, hey man, chant this mantra and you get everything you want. Namo Mihyo Ringe Kyo. But really what this is a condensed form of the Lotus Sutra. Okay? And this again, you pray to the Lotus Sutra to help you get enlightened, and for the Jodo, it's to become born in the Pure Land to get enlightened. These are the two biggest schools in Japan. I think the Jodo is bigger. But most people in Japan who are Buddhists are Jodo or Nichiren. Okay? All right. Now this is the, I mentioned to you the Shingon Temple in Japan in Narita. This is the picture of it. I was there. It's a very beautiful place. I recommend if you're on layover at the airport in Japan, go hang out in Narita for the day. Wonderful place. And notice the structure of this pagoda. This pagoda, and I don't have time to really go into this, but these pagodas are derived from, this is the top of it, they're really derived from these ancient India stupas. Okay, so these are places that were burial places for Buddha, or they put Buddhist relics, like they put his finger in one place or something, and they would build these stupas. And then as these move across China into Japan, they actually take on more of this pagoda form. And the idea here, and again, there's all sorts of symbolism here. I'm not going to test you on this, but you can read this on your own. But the idea is they have these kind of structures on the top, and also for the pagoda, there's sort of levels of these things. And what these are doing is basically representing the levels of spiritual attainment. This is the Wild Goose Pagoda in China that I was at again. So these things are these represent the levels of spiritual attainment, roughly. You can see this. Here's sort of, and also they represent sort of the cosmology of the world. So maybe the elements, 5 elements, which from India the 5 elements are earth, water, fire, wind, and void. We're going to talk about 5 elements in Taoism. In Chinese culture, they're going to be a little different. Okay, so don't confuse the two. Okay? But again, these stupas going to the pagodas can also represent these elements. Okay? And again, these represent the sort of levels of spiritual attainment. This is a drawing for Zen, calligraphy. Also want to mention Shinto, but I think we're out of time, so I'm going to talk about Shinto next time after Thanksgiving. And we'll talk about Taoism. So have a great holiday, you guys, and we'll see you after the Thanksgiving holiday.